Ray's shuttle tore through the upper skies of a green-blue planet far from any known star system. The alarms inside the cockpit had been screaming for over 20 minutes, but by now they were just background noise to his blurry thoughts. The systems had failed one after another, and now all he could do was try to land without dying. The ground rushed up to meet him, a dense jungle canopy with glowing leaves and swaying vines. The shuttle slammed through trees, bounced against thick branches, then finally skidded to a stop against a stone ridge. Ray's body jerked forward, slammed into the console, and everything went dark. The sun was already lowering by the time his eyes blinked open, and even then only slightly. The pain came first, then the confusion. He tasted blood on his lip, and something sticky clung to his side. The sounds of this planet were strange, deep hums, chirps, long singing whistles. It didn't sound dangerous, but it didn't sound safe either. Somewhere near him, soft footsteps approached, cautious and rhythmic. The leaves rustled slightly, and a figure stepped close. A humanoid girl with pale skin, a soft shimmer running along her arms, and long pale violet hair that flowed like smoke. Her eyes were large, almost glowing with curiosity, not fear. She knelt beside him, examining his injuries, then carefully placed a cool palm on his forehead. Her touch was warm, but it carried something else too, not heat, not electricity, but a kind of living pulse, a rhythm that made his blood stir slightly. She tilted her head, observing him more closely. He whispered something, trying to ask where he was, but it came out cracked and broken. Still she understood not the words, but the need. She gently slid her arm beneath his back and tried lifting him, though he was heavy and wounded. She wasn't strong, but she had patience and skill, and after a long effort, she managed to pull him from the wreckage and drag him across the mossy earth toward a hollow tree with soft inside walls and a glowing core. There, she began tending to him, using wet cloths and pulsing stones to slow the bleeding. The night deepened, and Ray drifted in and out of sleep, unaware of the hours slipping by. The next time he opened his eyes, the soft light from the tree hollow flickered around him, and the alien girl sat nearby, her eyes watching him with childlike wonder. Her gaze dropped toward his lower body, where a makeshift cloth covering had slipped during his twisting and sleep. Her expression changed, not into fear, but intense curiosity. She leaned in, one hand reaching out slowly, as if drawn by something instinctual. She had never seen a body like this before. She had never seen a human. Her species didn't reproduce in the same way, nor did they carry anything like what she now saw between his legs. Her fingers brushed against it very lightly, and in that moment, Ray's entire body jerked like someone had plugged him into a lightning storm. Heat flooded through his chest, then into his limbs, and his breathing shot up rapidly. His heart pounded, and a low groan escaped from his throat as his body arched slightly. The alien girl pulled back, startled, but also fascinated. She hadn't meant to hurt him, and she hadn't expected such a violent reaction. She watched as Ray's eyes flew wide open, this time alert and burning with energy. He didn't look tired anymore. He looked alive in a way no injured person should. He gasped, staring at her as if trying to piece together what had happened. But even as his mind struggled to catch up, he could feel that something inside had switched on. His vision sharpened. He could hear things far away, hear his own blood moving, feel the air as if it had texture. He sat up faster than he should have, nearly toppling over, but catching himself and breathing hard. The pain in his ribs was still there, but dull now, his muscles no longer aching, his skin tighter and charged with something he couldn't name. The alien girl slowly raised her hand as if to show she meant no harm, then said a single word from her language, soft and melodic, but incomprehensible. He didn't understand the sound, but he understood the feeling behind it. It was a question, a concerned one, not fear, but caution and care. Ray nodded slowly, unsure how to explain anything. After all, how could he tell her that her touch had just flipped some biological switch inside him, made him feel like he was burning with strength, made him feel like he could run for miles, fight 10 soldiers, lift a boulder all at once. Placed a hand on his chest, breathing carefully, focusing, trying to calm the wild pulse racing through him. His body felt like a machine, finally booted up after a long cold slumber. She stepped closer again, this time gently placing her hand over his wrist. Her skin was soft and cool, but again that pulsing rhythm passed through the contact, and again his body flinched, his heart stuttered in surprise. She pulled away quickly, eyes wide but not afraid, just overwhelmed. They stared at each other in the quiet hollow, the air thick with something new, not danger, not panic, but a kind of raw, invisible connection, something ancient, something neither of them could name, but both could feel. He tried to speak again, asking her name, but his throat, still dry, failed him. She smiled faintly and pointed at herself, saying something that sounded like Kira, but not quite. He nodded, repeating the sound, and pointed at himself. Ray, she repeated it softly. Ray then said it again, slower, her accent twisting it slightly. Ray. He smiled despite everything, and she smiled back. They were strangers from different worlds with no shared language, no history. But somehow now their paths had twisted together through fire crash and a single curious touch that had sent his very DNA into a frenzy outside. The hollow, the forest pulsed with distant noise, something moving in the shadows, something awakened by the surge of energy that had just been unleashed. Ray didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them understood, something that would not only change him, but possibly the future of both their species. Air shimmered, and in the trees high above, a cold red light blinked once, then vanished. He closed his eyes for a second, breathing deep, letting the wild rhythm inside him settle, or at least rest. His journey had started with a crash, but now it felt like something far older than any mission had taken control of his fate. The girl sat beside him in silence, her eyes still watching the strange human who now pulsed with untamed power. And somewhere inside Ray, something whispered, awake, something ancient, something human. Ray's mind was still trying to catch up with his body. He could feel something inside had changed, and it was not just pain or healing or adrenaline. It was something deeper, something that reached into the very roots of his being. As he sat in the glowing hollow beside the strange alien girl, he felt every beat of his heart echo like thunder through his blood. Girl was still watching him, her large eyes filled with a strange light, not fear, but a kind of alert calm, as if she could see something in him that he could not yet understand. She gently reached into a small pouch tied around her waist and pulled out a soft fruit, the size of a fist, its skin smooth and glowing with a blue light. She held it toward him with both hands, her expression gentle. Ray took it slowly, not sure if it was safe, but trusting her more than the unknown forest outside. He bit into it, and the taste hit him like a wave, sweet and warm and full of strange energy that rushed through his veins. The effect was immediate. His mind grew sharper, more alert, like fog lifting from a valley after a long storm. Kira spoke again, using soft tones and pointing her fingers carefully as she explained things without words. She drew shapes in the air, using her hands, tracing circles, then lines, and mimicking actions like reaching, touching, moving. She touched her chest and then pointed to Ray, then to her own head, and touched her fingers together, as if showing a link. He didn't understand the full meaning, but he felt it. That touch had done something real, not just a physical response. It had triggered something inside him, something her kind did not expect from contact with others. Kira stepped back a little and reached behind her back, pulling a flat stone tablet with moving symbols glowing faintly. She pressed a few, and an image appeared above it, showing a figure similar to Ray standing upright, glowing with red light. Then another figure appeared beside it, also glowing but with green light. The two figures touched, and a spark formed between them that grew larger and brighter until it became a flame. Ray stared at the image as it looped again and again. He understood the symbol. It was about contact, something ancient, something her people seemed to know about, but had long forgotten or perhaps avoided. Kira pressed another spot on the tablet, and the image changed, now showing a different scene, a long curved structure, a dome or city surrounded by vines with strange machines walking around it. Then the scene shifted, showing the machines turning on their makers, destroying everything before fading into the trees, becoming silent watchers hidden until awakened again. Voice trembled slightly as she spoke the next word, a word that Ray could almost understand: breakers. The word echoed in his mind like something familiar even though he had never heard it before. Ray placed his hand over his chest again, feeling the strange hum inside him. It wasn't just physical energy, it felt alive, as if something inside his blood had opened its eyes for the first time in generations. Suddenly outside the hollow, a low humming sound rose from the forest, slow, steady, and unnatural. The trees shivered slightly, and the glowing leaves dimmed as if reacting to something dark approaching. Kira froze, her eyes wide, then quickly moved to a corner of the hollow where she pulled aside a cover, revealing a long, narrow tunnel. She pointed at Ray, then at the tunnel, urgency in every movement. Ray tried to stand, and though his legs were sore, they obeyed with strange ease. His balance was strong, his vision perfect. He could see every detail in the dim light. They moved through the tunnel fast, Kira leading the way with careful steps, Ray following close behind. Every now and then she would stop, listening, then continue, always keeping to the shadows. They emerged in a small clearing far from the hollow and crouched behind a wide tree, its trunk warm with a faint pulse like a living being. Ray looked back toward the direction they came from and saw it, a tall shape moving through the trees, smooth metal plates covered its body, its head shaped like a bird with a single red eye scanning the ground. It moved with silent grace, but the power behind its steps shook the ground slightly. Kira's breath caught as she watched the machine pass by. Her hand reached for Ray's arm, gripping him tightly, not out of fear but warning. The machine paused, turned its head slightly, then continued walking, vanishing into the deeper forest. Ray could feel it again, that pulse inside him growing stronger, almost reacting to the presence of the machine, as if drawn to it, or perhaps awakened by it. Kira sat down slowly, her shoulders tense. She picked up a stick and began drawing shapes in the dirt, one after another, showing a circle, then a line, then a figure with sparks, then flames, then darkness, then another spark. This time inside the circle again. Ray watched her carefully, understanding more with each movement. Her people had once tried something long ago, perhaps giving power to another species, maybe to defend, or maybe to guide. But it had gone wrong. The machines had turned against them, and now the old fear kept them from touching the unknown again. But he was different. His body didn't just react, it adapted. It grew stronger every hour. He picked up a stick and drew his own line beside hers. He drew his own figure, then added another spark, and instead of letting it fall into fire, he drew a hand rising from it, holding light, then added her figure beside it. Stared at his drawing for a long time, then looked up at him with something like hope in her eyes. The night wind blew gently through the trees, carrying a sound like a distant hum, but fading as the forest returned to quiet. Ray knew now that he had become something else, not because of technology, not because of a machine, but because of something alive, something passed down through blood and touch and instinct. He sat beside her in silence, the earth warm beneath them, the stars above unfamiliar but beautiful. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he felt the weight of it already, and for the first time since crashing on this strange planet, he wasn't afraid. Not of the machines, not of his changing body, not of what might come next. He was human, and now he was more than that. And beside him, the alien girl who had awakened something ancient in him closed her eyes and listened to the forest, waiting for what would come next. Sky turned deeper with every passing hour, and strange moons began to rise above the forest, their surfaces glowing with pale reflections of hidden oceans. Ray sat close to the flickering fire Kira had built with a few gentle stones and dry leaves, and for a while the world around them seemed quiet, but it was not peace. It was the kind of stillness that came before something moved. Kira sat across from him, her eyes fixed on the strange glow that had started to shimmer faintly beneath the surface of Ray's skin, along his arms and near his collarbone. She reached out slowly and touched a point just above his heart where the light pulsed strongest. Her fingers trembled slightly as if they remembered something from far away. Ray looked down at himself, and then at her, searching for some way to understand what was happening to his body. He felt stronger with each breath, clearer and thought more alert in movement, and though he was still human, something inside him was becoming sharper, like the old boundaries of bone and muscle and thought were breaking and reforming. Kira stood up without a word and motioned for Ray to follow. She led him through the underbrush into a narrow path surrounded by thick roots and tall glowing plants. They walked for several minutes until the path widened into an ancient chamber buried deep beneath moss and vine. In the center of the chamber stood a towering column made of black stone and etched with golden lines that moved slowly like liquid beneath glass. Kira approached it and placed both palms against its surface. The golden lines brightened in response, and a low hum filled the air. The column responded by opening small panels that revealed old symbols, old recordings, perhaps even memories projected in the air like glowing ribbons of light. Ray stepped closer, watching the images as they danced across the space above the column. They showed beings much like Kira, but taller, older, their bodies covered in flowing armor made of light and crystal. These beings stood beside strange humans, not from Earth, but humans just the same, with dark eyes and fire in their hands. Together they fought against machines twisted and massive, their limbs covered in jagged metal and glowing cores. The battles were violent, but also full of purpose. It was not just survival, it was a mission to preserve something sacred. One image paused longer than the rest. It showed a human standing alone among shattered ruins, his body glowing with the same strange energy that now pulsed beneath Ray's skin. He stood facing a machine that towered over him, his arms raised not in fear but in control, and as the image faded, the words that followed pulsed across the air in the ancient language of Kira's people. Breaker Protocol. Kira looked at Ray, then touched her forehead and pointed to his chest, then back to the column. She was trying to say the same thing had been done before long ago, and now the process was starting again through him. Ray stepped forward and placed his hand where Kira's had touched. The stone felt cold at first, then alive and warm, and in that moment he felt something reach inside his mind, not a voice, but a memory not his own. He saw flashes of people, cities, falling skies, burning, and then the feeling of strength pouring through limbs that should have broken under pressure, but instead rose and fought back. The light around him grew stronger, and Kira backed away as the symbols from the stone climbed up his arms and traced his skin like fire, but without pain. It was not just a machine or a system, it was a code, a living signal passed through ancient blood, awakened only by instinct and need. Ray fell to one knee, breathing hard as the rush of knowledge faded, but the strength remained. He looked up at Kira, and she stepped toward him, slowly, as if unsure whether to stop what had begun or to trust its path. He stood again, taller this time. Not in height but in presence. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she looked not at a visitor or stranger, but something closer to the figures in the old stories, something meant to rise when the machines returned. A sharp sound tore through the trees outside the chamber, a shriek of metal bending and snapping. Kira turned quickly, her hands moving fast in warning. They were not alone. The machines had found them. Ray followed her out of the chamber and into the clearing where the ground shook beneath heavy steps. Shadows moved between the trees, fast and cold, without sound except for the clicking of metal claws and the pulse of red lights in the dark. One of the machines stepped forward, its shape different from the one before, larger, with thick armor and a rotating core of glowing steel. It scanned the area, and its red light locked onto Ray. Without thinking, Ray moved. His body shifted faster than he expected, his feet digging into the earth as he sprinted forward. Every step felt guided not by thought but by instinct. Something inside him knew how to move, how to strike, how to survive. He grabbed a thick branch and used it like a spear, driving it into the side of the machine. As it turned, the wood splintered, but the machine jerked off balance, and Ray followed with his fist, slamming into the joint near its leg. The metal cracked slightly, and the creature staggered. Kira stood behind another tree, her hand raised, channeling some force of her own toward the machine. People were not warriors, but they had learned how to control the flow of life energy, and now she sent it like a wave into the clearing, stunning the machine. Just long enough for Ray to strike again. Ray's body was not just reacting anymore, it was learning, adapting. The more he fought, the more his strikes hit true, his movements smoother, faster, the lines from the ancient stone still glowing beneath, his skin guiding him like a silent teacher. The machine let out one last shriek before collapsing, its body burning with sparks as it hit the forest floor. Ray fell to one knee, breathing fast but steady. The machine was down, but others would come. He turned to Kira, who looked both amazed and afraid, not of him, but of what he had become. She stepped closer and placed her hand on his chest again, not to test him this time, but to feel what lived inside the light, the code, the ancient protocol that had chosen to wake. Inside him, Ray looked up at the sky, now shifting colors as another moon began to rise. He didn't know how many machines remained or what the final purpose of the Breaker Protocol was, but he understood now that it had not been about destruction. It had been about balance, about defending life without falling into madness, about becoming more without losing what it means to be human. Kira whispered something softly, and Ray didn't need to understand the word because he felt the meaning. He had become the bridge between their worlds, and the war was just beginning. Forest no longer whispered, it roared in silence as energy shifted deep beneath its roots. Old systems humming back to life, called by the touch of a forgotten signal. Ray stood still in the fading light, his breath calm, but his body filled with raw motion, each cell humming with silent fire. Kira moved beside him, her eyes on the stars above, as if listening to voices beyond the sky, her fingers tracing symbols in the air, searching for answers from the ancestors whose knowledge still flowed in. The land, though scattered and broken, Ray followed her eyes, wondering if somewhere up there his people were watching, if anyone knew that something was being born here that had not stirred for ages. They walked through the trees, following the glow of moss that shifted color with every step, as if recognizing the pattern now carried in Ray's blood. The symbol of the Breaker, not a destroyer, but a changer, a rewriter of fate, meant to unlock what lies buried ahead, stood a hill shaped like a dome, its surface smooth like stone, yet breathing with quiet heat, veins of soft green light pulsing through cracks that moved in rhythm with the stars above. Kira pointed toward it, her voice low, her steps careful. As they approached, the dome opened without touch, its surface melting into a narrow path that led downward into the ground. Ray stepped forward, feeling the pressure of old things, the memories of a place once sacred, once alive with voices, and now waiting, only silence meeting there. Arrival inside the dome, the walls shimmered with soft waves of color, and as they walked deeper, Kira's face changed, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open in awe. She recognized the place, and yet it had changed, grown colder, darker, quieter over the centuries. They reached a large chamber at the core, where a single platform rose from the ground, surrounded by floating pieces of stone and metal. Suspended in air by nothing visible, in the center stood a pillar, cracked, but still pulsing with ancient energy. Ray walked to it, slowly, drawn not by curiosity, but by something inside his chest that called to the light around it. He placed his palm on the stone, and the platform beneath him lit up, symbols running up his legs and wrapping around his waist to his shoulders, forming a complete circle of energy. Kira gasped as the lights responded, not with rejection, but with welcome, as if the system recognized the human not as a threat, but as something long expected. Ray felt heat in his mind. Images, memories, not his own, floods of sound and faces and voices in languages he had never learned. Saw a war that tore planets apart, not with fire but with silence, machines erasing life, not by force but by breaking connection, by making living things forget who they were and what they had once protected. He saw the first breakers, not soldiers but guardians, chosen not for strength but for their bond with others, their ability to feel and to adapt. One of them was human, older, stronger eyes filled with sorrow and light as he stood alone in a broken field, holding back the machines with his voice alone, not with weapons, but with will. Ray felt the memory pass through him like a storm, and when his eyes opened again, the chamber had changed. Floating stones formed a ring around him and began to move faster the light, pulling into his chest and forming a pattern that mirrored the one on the ancient projection back in the forest. The code was now part of him, not just a reaction, not just a burst of power, but a full connection to the core. Kira stepped onto the platform beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder, her presence grounding the storm inside him. Together they faced the ring of light as it pulsed once, then stilled. A soft tone filled the air, and from the walls projections formed, showing new shapes. The machines, not asleep, but moving, gathering, adapting, preparing for something larger than patrols or hunts. They were building something deeper, something rooted in the Old War I. image stopped them both. It showed Kira standing still, her body wrapped in energy lines, her eyes blank. The machines surrounding her as if she were a source of power, not just a target. The system had tagged her as a catalyst, her touch, her presence capable of activating the breaker code, fully and forever. Ray turned to her, realizing that what had happened between them was not an accident, but the result of an ancient design. Her kind built the system, and his kind unknowingly carried the key. She met his gaze without fear, only understanding that the bond they shared now had a purpose. Beyond survival, outside the dome, a tremor shook the ground. The machines had tracked the signal again. They were closing in, and this time they were no longer sending scouts, but a full unit shaped for assault. Ray and Kira stepped off the platform, the lights dimming behind them, the knowledge still glowing inside. Ray's body now steadier, calmer, no longer wildfire but focused current. He felt his movements guided by something he could not name, like being held from within by hands of light and memory. As they exited the dome, they saw them, the machines, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching, not rushing, not attacking, waiting. Ray felt the challenge in the air, the test of readiness. The machines had learned too, and now they were calculating. Stepped forward slowly, his eyes locked on the tallest among them, its form jagged with spiked limbs, and a face shaped like a mirror, reflecting his own stance as if mocking his humanity. Kira moved beside him, her hands glowing with the same energy that once flowed through the ancient guardians, the ritual of full contact now complete between them, the bond no longer accidental, but accepted together. They raised their arms, and the ground beneath them responded, light spreading from their feet in all directions, forming a wide circle that pushed against the dark presence of the machines. The largest machine stepped forward, but stopped as if testing the edge of the light, then slowly tilted its head before speaking in a broken voice, a voice that sounded like metal trying to remember speech. You are the last. Ray did not answer with words. He stepped into the center of the circle, and the light followed. The machines moved at once, their bodies fast and silent, the forest shaking with their charge, but the circle held. Ray moved with new clarity, each motion sharp like memory returning, and Kira moved beside him, her touch guiding his strikes. Not just as an ally, but as the source of his focus. They fought not to destroy, but to hold the line, to prove that the code still lived, not in weapons, but in the will to protect what matters most. The machines fell one by one, not because of weakness, but because of unity. As the last one collapsed and the clearing stilled, Ray stood with Kira beside him, breathing slow and deep, the light around them dimming as the core inside him quieted once more. Had not won a war, but they had won this moment, and somewhere deep inside Ray, something waited, not for battle, but for choice. The clearing stood silent. The machines lay scattered in pieces across the moss-covered ground, their cores dim, and their limbs broken by force and focus, not rage. Ray stood still, his breath steady, the fire inside him no longer wild, no longer rushing, but moving like a deep river, controlled, strong and sure. Beside him, Kira moved gently, her steps calm, her eyes still holding that glow which first awoke something in him. Light around them had faded, the forest slowly returned to itself, the air thick with the scent of torn metal and crushed roots. But the energy that lived in Ray did not fade. It remained like a second skin, like breath itself. Now part of him, no longer borrowed, no longer unstable, but his own. They walked through the trees, moving back toward the sacred chamber where the breaker code had completed its circle. The path remembered them, the ground responding to their steps, the trees shifting softly as if bowing to the presence of something that had not been seen for generations. They entered the chamber once more. The light from the stone rose again, this time calm, no storm, no pressure, only warmth and memory. The pillar now recognized Ray not just as a chosen, not just as a carrier, but as something greater. He placed his palm against the stone, and the symbols returned. But they no longer flashed or spun. They moved slowly, like pages in a story now complete. Images of guardians, old and new, humans and aliens, standing together, the same flame burning in their eyes, a unity not forged by conquest but by connection. Kira stood beside him, her hand lightly touching his shoulder, and the chamber opened. Further, a new path sliding from the wall, a staircase made of crystal leading down into silence. They exchanged a glance and stepped forward. The lower chamber held something different, not stone or machines, but a living network, vines glowing with soft light, wrapped through the walls and ceiling, a pulsing heart at the center. Not a machine, not a core, but something organic, something alive. Kira stepped closer and touched the surface of the heart, and it opened, revealing a small orb floating above a cradle of living light. The orb flickered with images, fast and gentle, and Ray could feel it pulling at something inside him, not his body, but his thoughts, his hopes, his memories. The orb held the last blueprint of the original breaker system, not just the power, not just the code, but the choice. The gift meant only for those who understood the cost. Ray reached out, and the orb moved to his hand, soft and weightless, but full of history, full of purpose. He closed his fingers around it, and the chamber reacted. The vines lit up brighter, the walls shimmered, and the room echoed with a voice, not in words, but in feeling. It asked not for loyalty, not for obedience, but for intent. Kira looked at him quietly, waiting for him to speak. Though no language could answer the voice, he closed his eyes and thought of Earth, of the stars, of the crash and the fire, and the touch that changed everything. He thought of her first question, her curious eyes, her fearless heart. And he thought of the machines not as enemies, but as reminders of what happens when power loses direction, when creation forgets compassion. The Kumdesh orb sank into his chest, disappearing beneath the skin, and for a moment, the light inside him burned brighter than ever before, then faded into a soft glow. His heartbeat steady, his mind clear. When they rose from the chamber, the forest had changed. The wind carried a different tone, and the trees no longer watched in fear. The machines were gone, not just broken, but disconnected. Their system no longer bound to the old code. The pulse had ended. Ray and Kira returned to the hollow where it all began. The tree still glowing gently, the leaves swaying above like a roof of stars. They sat beside the soft fire. She built again, the flames small but alive. She placed her hand near his, and this time he met it with his own, not for energy, not for survival, but simply for closeness. Two sparks resting side by side. Ray knew this world was not his home, but now it was part of him. He knew Earth was far, and his people might never know what was unlocked here, but he also knew something important. He was not just a visitor, he was a turning point, a reminder that humanity was more than machines, more than war, more than survival. They were potential, they were instinct and heart, and they were the ones who could take ancient power and give it purpose again. Kira whispered his name, not as a question, not as a call, but as a memory already formed, and he looked at her and smiled, not because the war was over, but because something better had begun. The stars turned slowly above them, the sky holding no answers, only possibilities, and Ray watched them, not with fear, but with hope. The human spark had awakened, and it was not finished yet. The end